you, Eleanor. And at last we have to introduce our talker today, Lynne Morris, who was trained first as a qualified nurse and then got the call to become a member of the church and was ordained in 1999. I know that the first women priests were only ordained in 1994, so that does make Lynne quite a pioneer in that area. So I'd like to invite Lynne, please, to take the podium and commence the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be with you today in Shrewsbury. Yes, I am a vicar, real Vicar Dibley. And we went blonde the same week, so that's a bit of a factual thing. I'm here today to share with you some 25 odd years of experiences, funny stories, startling stories, shocking stories behind Hatch, Match and Despatch. All right, and don't you know, there's nothing serious about this, so you know, enjoy it. Because when you're this side of the collar, things happen and you hear things happen. And it's very strange that the things that go on. Like the chap that was speeding along the Smithfield Road one morning, and he got stopped by a police officer, and the driver was obviously very upset about this, and he kicked off quite badly, but very rude. Very shocking, isn't it? To be rude to a police officer who arrested him and took him in to the police station, and where the driver was extremely rude again, so they threw him into a cell. Told him to stay there for at least 2 hours to calm down. 2 hours later, the police officer came down and the man was sitting there with his head in his hands, crying. And he said, "I'm glad you've calmed down," he said. "The Sarge will be coming in a minute, and he'll be glad to see that you're a lot calmer and not rude. He'll be in a very good mood. It's his daughter's wedding day today, so he should give you a caution." And the man sat up and he says, "I doubt it, I'm the groom." Now you'd think, wouldn't you, that people who organise and arrange their marriages would do things properly, wouldn't you? And I don't know if you want to do a quick guess on how much a wedding costs today, 2015. Research this very last week has shown that £27,364 is spent on a wedding. So you would think, wouldn't you, that things would go right. I remember the groom that stood on the altar steps and his mobile phone went off and he answered it. If you think that was bad, what about the groom who called his brand new wife by a completely different name? Ian might remember, Ian with us today, our colleague who was taking your wedding, and the police charged in and up the aisle and arrested the man before he could get married. They say, don't they, don't work with children and animals, and my friend Sue tells me the story of how the driver, and she was getting ready for a wedding one Saturday morning, and if you've got a dog, you know how dogs can get a bit excitable, can't you? You know? And this dog weed on a veil and a train. And bless her, she had to come up the aisle in a very smelly, yellow train. Very bad. If you think that was bad enough, this bride came into the church, and I remember it well. And she looked stunning, ladies and gentlemen, with a cut-off, beautiful cut-off, you know, dress, strapless dress, beautiful. But she was covered in tattoos. As she sailed down the aisle, across her back for everybody to see was the name of the chap, not the chap she was about to marry. Again, the bride, it had rained overnight and early in the morning, and the bride had asked the dog, her pet dog, come into the church to accompany her. And I have no problem with animals at certain services. If your animal, your pet, has been close to you throughout your life, why shouldn't you have your animal at your wedding and funeral. But on this particular occasion, the bride had scrubbed this dog down to its nth, put a big bow around its neck, and put the dog in charge of her younger brother, who wasn't very efficient at his job. Because as they came down the drive to the cars, the dog slipped its lead and ran off. The young brother chased it, all right, grabbed it, and we all know what dogs like to do in muddy puddles, don't we? Yes, it did. And what does dogs do when they're wet and muddy? They shake, and she came up the aisle in a mud-splattered dress. I met a gentleman, he was actually a driver of wedding cars and funeral cars at a talk a few weeks ago, and he tells me the story of how he'd fetched the bride and the father from home, and the car had broken down and it got stuck in sort of a bit of a countrified ditch, you know, at the edge. And the father had got out of the car to help push this car going, and of course you can guess, you know, the trousers got muddy, didn't it, you know? And the father had said apparently, well, I can't go into church with my daughter looking like this. So the driver, he said, I suggested that we swap trousers. So they got behind this hedge to swap trousers, which would have been a good idea, but the driver was 6 foot at least, and the father was 5'6" or so. So he apparently came up here like that. Very, very, very funny. Brides' dresses come in all literally shapes and sizes, and I have to say, you know, brides look beautiful on their day, they really do. But for this particular bride, she was a big girl, all right? She was a big girl. And I don't know who said to her that this meringue of a dress was the ideal dress to wear on a wedding day. But, you know, she went with it. And as the doors opened at the church, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Dada into church? The groom turned round and he said, bloody hell. Now, that wouldn't have been so bad if she hadn't heard. So you can imagine a bit of a spat, you know. I had a bride who, she looked beautiful, and she came into church with a strapless dress. Now, ladies, when we bought our wedding dresses, however long ago it was, we probably went into a shop, didn't we? And we picked one out, and we went into a kiosk, you know, a little cubicle, and we tried it on, and we came out and we did a turn, did we not? Yeah. And we thought, beautiful. This bride, I hope she's not in the room. This bride had obviously brought her wedding dress some while before the wedding day. And she came into, when we'd had the wedding rehearsal on the Tuesday night, she just came in t-shirts, you know, and jeans, fine. But on the Saturday she came, excuse me gentlemen, but she came with the biggest bazooms you've ever seen in your life. And she pushed herself into this dress so much that it didn't leave much to the imagination. Now think of this, ladies and gentlemen, Daddy is giving her away. Daddy's never seen his daughter, all right, dressed so like this. And as she sails down the aisle towards me, the dress slips. All right? So when she gets to me, I'm standing, when she gets to me, we're doing a bit of which made it worse. Because by now, there was literally nothing to leave you to the imagination. So standing here, of course, was the bridegroom and the best man. All right, now the bride, I don't know about their relationship. I don't ask things about that, of course. But he was soon getting an eyeful, you know. But it was the best man that was got the eyeful. And I saw him sort of position himself so that he could, and his eyes were literally on stalks. The bridegroom by this time clocked what was going on, and there was a bit of this going on. The father had clocked what was going on, and this poor girl was standing in front of me trying to do her best, all right, to cover herself up. All went well until I said, and who has the rings? Who has the rings? and I literally had to go like this to the best man. It wasn't very good. When I took them to the high altar for their prayers and their blessing and final blessing, we had to do some serious work. So she had to walk back up this way. It was very, very sad, very sad. Sad too was the missing groom that I had. 4 minutes into the wedding, 4 minutes before, it was 2 o'clock the wedding was due to, and I had a phone call to say the groom wasn't going to turn up. Ooh, yes, exactly. And I said I had to send a message to say that I would wait till 4 o'clock, and if he turns up at 4 o'clock we could have the wedding. Well, no, they said, you've got to send everybody to the reception. The reception's got to carry on. Can you imagine going to reception under those circumstances? And we had bridesmaids and page boys and everybody else, and it was pure Hollywood system, would you let everybody, do go. And he didn't turn up, he never did turn up. So that's sad, isn't it? That's sad. And actually I did feel more sorry for the bridesmaids, who looked lovely, the little girls and everything else. My vicar colleague, I won't mention any names, he's not in the room, thankfully, decided that the bridegroom was missing. Where was he? He's in the pub. So we went off to the pub to find them, and while he was there, he was offered a drink, and he was offered another drink. 45 minutes later, he turns up at the church, and the bride had been waiting for him. But you see, drink has a problem sometimes, with grooms especially, and I can always tell if they've had a drink before they come into church, and of course by law, if somebody's drunk, I don't marry them. And on this one occasion, I'd said to the lad, I think you probably better go to the loo, hadn't you? He says, I don't want to go to the loo. I said, well, I'd like you to go to the loo, please. He says, I don't want to go to the loo. I said, well, you had a drink, and I know what's going to happen halfway through the service. You'll want a wee, but I don't want to go to the toilet. I said, I'm sorry, but I insist that you go to the loo. Who do you think you are? He said, me mother. I said, Sonny, for this service, I am your mother, your auntie, your granny, and everybody, so go to the loo. So I made him go to the loo. Gentlemen, can you remember in about 2005-ish, there was a very important European football match. I think it was Italy and England played. I think it was Milan. Well, on this particular Saturday afternoon, a wedding had been organised, much to the sorrow of all these gentlemen that were attending this wedding. And the Virgin had said to me, Lynn, everybody's outside, the bridesmaids have arrived, and nobody will come into church. So I said, come on, I'll go outside, you see. So I said, come on, everybody, please. Would you come into church, because the bridesmaids have arrived, therefore the bride will shortly follow. And they were all on their phones, on their phones and whatever you had in those days. And they were obviously listening to the match. I says, come on, oh well, now ladies, when men don't want to be anywhere, don't you? So it was like, being at the dentist, come on in, you see. So I got them in, and a chap came to me and he says, we're going to leave Sid sitting outside, listening to the match. I said, okay. He said, and when anybody scores, when there's a score made, he's going to come into the church and tell you the score so you can tell everybody. I says, I don't think so. He says, oh yes, he says, because everybody won't hear the match and Sid's going to hear it. I says, I'm sorry, I says, but this is a wedding. Solemn occasion, we don't want to be into oh yes, it'll be all right. No, it won't, I said. All right, he said, if you won't let Sid come in and tell you the score, how about, I don't know how he's going to do it, hold up a piece of paper, a card at the back of the church with a score on, so then you can tell everybody. I says, I'm not having that either. And they got quite upset, so I never did receive a Christmas card off that year. And it's interesting that obviously it must have been, I don't know, half-time or something. While we were doing the registration, Sid came into church and told me the score to tell everybody else. And the interesting thing, ladies and gentlemen, everybody knew that I knew. Sid, I said, just stand here, just sit there, you see. So I wouldn't let him go back up. And at the end of the service, as I'd said the final blessing and everything else, I said, would you all like to know the score of the match so far? And it was the fastest exodus from church you could ever want. So there you go, things do happen. Things happen lovely. As I said, I'm a hospital and hospice chaplain in Birmingham, and it's a great privilege to do that role, to have that role there. And I do have weddings, and there's a special criteria for having weddings in hospital. And in 2001, a young man who'd had his relationship with his girlfriend for 12 years, they got a family, beautiful family, and he was very, very, very poorly. And he knew that his prognosis was poor. And he said, Lynn, could you marry us on Valentine's Day? Because I don't really think, and I'll be realistic now, ladies and gentlemen. And he said, I don't think I'm going to last much longer. And it's true, he was dying. And I said, that would be a privilege. So we arranged through all the proper formalities to have the wedding. And on Valentine's Day. And it was a beautiful occasion because they were able to marry and make everything legal. You know what I'm saying? And he went back to the ward, and we sat with him through the night. And the night passed, and the morning came, and the next day came. And, you know, there was that just bit of glimmer of hope now. And in this year, on Valentine's Day, we did their renewal of wedding vows. And he said to me, something happened on that day when I married them. Something happened and turned the corner. And he's at home now, living as independent life as he possibly can with carers coming in most of the days. But isn't that a good story of hope, that things do happen lovely? And, you know, I could be here all week with stories, but things do, other funny things happen. Music plays a lot of part in weddings, and the bride and groom, they wanted this particular piece of music to come out of church. And at the rehearsal, the organist had happened to be there. And we were discussing this particular piece of music. Oh, yes, she says, I know that piece of music. Well, yes, I know that. Now, this piece of music was from a famous film score of the time. Bryan Adams, Everything I Do for You. All right? You know what it's from, don't you? It's from Robin Hood. And the bride and groom came up the aisle to Robin Hood. I'm not saying it was the same couple that went out into the big wide world as man and wife, but and it was the same groom that was found behind a headstone in the graveyard with one of the bridesmaids. Yes. Oh, that caused a bit of a stink. Have you ever been invited to a wedding theme? You know, themed wedding, you know? Some while ago in Stoke-on-Trent, where I was working, we had a couple come with their request for cowboys and Indians. They belong to one of these associations, you know, reenactments. And okay, so they were all going to come dressed up, and I said, fine. And I suddenly had this thought, what are you going to do with your guns and your bows and arrows? You know, it's a question, isn't it? Well, when you say the magic words, we're going to knock off these guns and bows. I says, you're not. He says, this ceiling's been here since 1865. So I made them have a nice little, you know, mound of them by the door. They weren't very pleased, but, you know. In November, in my parish church, the couple wanted an Elvis Presley wedding. And Reverend Matthew was asked to don the white suit. But, you know, some weddings, they have a bit of sensitivity. I know of a bride who sent out the invitations to people that we weren't to buy new clothes. They had to have charity shop clothes. You can get lots of good stuff in charity shops, can't you? And then there was the bride who sold advertisements sites on her wedding dress. What's that about? I don't often get in, I say I get invited to the receptions after. It's very nice when we vicars do. And the few occasions that I've been have been quite strange. I remember being asked to go to one in Stoke-on-Trent, and it was at a village hall. And when we got there, the caterers hadn't turned up. And so we all had to go off to Asda to get finger food, you know. That's bad, isn't it? I do know one wedding reception taking place in McDonald's. You know, fast food, and off you go, you know. But the village hall that I was invited to, and nobody had ordered and organised the licence for the bar. And as I was... the groom had been sent out to get this booze, and as I came in, he was coming back in, and he said, now there were 60 to 70 people at the reception, remember, and he said, do you think this is enough? And he just bought one bottle of sherry. I said, no, I don't think so, I don't think so, I don't think so, I don't think so. Do you want to hear some of the names of people that have married one another? These are true and real. All the stories I tell are real, but these are real names. His name was MacDonald, and her was Burger. His name was Looney, and hers was Ward. His was Hardy, and hers was Har. His was Gowan, and hers was Getter. But I think the prize is hers was Long, and his was Wee Wee. I got some more names for you later on. Well, you know, Hatch, Match and Despatch, if we thought that things happened in weddings, they certainly do at funerals, believe you me. I remember well the family that were throwing punches at one another over the coffin as it went down the aisle. My colleague was taking a service, and the coffin was there, and the mobile phone went off, and it was obviously nobody's in. And he realised it was coming from the coffin. Thank goodness he's not answering it, he said. There is a man buried not 2 million miles away from where we're sitting now, where he didn't realise he was so wealthy as he was when he died. He was in charge of buying the lottery tickets, and they had their own numbers, you know, the family had the numbers each week. And sadly he died, and he was dressed in obviously his clothes that he would be known well. And Saturday the numbers came up. Now by this time he was already buried, and the family looked high, low and level for this lottery ticket, and they realised that it must be in Dad's pocket. And this is obviously true, but they eventually they phoned my colleague. Well, no, I can't do anything about it, you know, can't get a spade and dig him up. And they did a great deal of work to try and get this coffin brought up. And they took it to the High Court in the end, and the judge said no. So there's a very rich man in the graveyard. In Birmingham, they've done an awful lot of work to some of the council houses, the old, you know, the old post-war houses. And I had a patient who had made a wish in his will that the funeral cortege must stop outside his home on the way to his funeral. Okay, you know, we get these sort of requests. And on this particular day, I'm sitting in the hearse with the driver and the funeral director, and we travel along this quite lengthy avenue, and the council have altered the windows, so they're quite sort of, you know, those picture windows? They're very nice, very good. You can imagine, can't you, this hearse stopping outside this house that this chap had been born in and not lived in for donkey's years, all right? So the undertaker and I get out of the hearse, and we stand in front of the house, you see, all very reverent and smart. Now, the children by this time have come home from school, and the family is sitting in the front lounge watching television. You can imagine, I'll never forget the shock, horror of me and this undertaker bowing to this house, and they're standing there. Can you, and technology, I'm not into technology, but can you remember late last year A massive accident on the motorway where people were massive traffic jam and all this, and within this big traffic jam was a family who were supposed to be attending a service we were taking at one of the crematoriums in Birmingham, and they were just not going to be able to make the service. And do you know what we did? We got our iPhones and mobile phones, and they were able to see the proceedings from the car into the crem. How good's that? They were there. I'm going to use that again for weddings, I think, you know, especially for the patients who can't get to weddings, their grandchildren's weddings, and now I know that we can do it. There you go. It was on the day that we were travelling down the driveway to one of the crematoriums in Birmingham. They're very long in Birmingham, trees and everything else, and I was taking this service for Bill, and I'd got very close to Bill while he'd been in hospital for a long, long time. Some of our patients can stay with us for anything from a week to 18 months because of their rehabilitation. And Bill had sadly died, and his grown-up grandchildren, 6 of them, were walking alongside the coffin, all right? I'm sitting in the dicky seat, which is a small seat at the back of the hearse. And I say to the driver, they were all wearing football scarves. Now, he was Scottish by birth. And I said to the driver, because the funeral director was walking in front of the hearse, and I said, what are these, you know, the scarves, what are they from? And he says, I have no idea, Lynn. Now, so I wind down the window, and I said, oh, well, I'll ask the granddaughter. So I wind down the window, and I reach out, and I touch her on the shoulder, and she jumped 3 miles high. She didn't know I was there. It was a Celtic scarf, of course. There was, I did a Caribbean funeral. If you've ever been to a Caribbean funeral, you know to take the day off, because they're very, very lengthy. And I'd asked to take this service, and for a lovely, lovely lady, and everybody was dancing and singing. It was lovely, all right? It was lovely. But to cut a very, very long story short, halfway through the service, a lady walked past me from the congregation. I thought, okay. And then another lady walked past me from the congregation, and another lady, and then a gentleman. And before long, I got a queue, and I thought, where are they? So I sort of just did this, you know, as you do. And they were having a natural loo break in the middle of the service. Can you imagine having a toilet break in the middle of the service? But, you know, I could keep you busy all day with that particular story, but that was a wonderful thing to do. Wonderful was the 42-minute sermon that a chap gave during a funeral service that I was conducting, and I got into trouble for this. He'd said, can I say something about the gentleman that had died, who'd been in the war, served in the World War II? Yes, says Lynn. Now, this is in my early days, my naive days, all right? And I said, yes, do say something, you see. And 42 minutes later, we had the battle, the weather conditions, the roads, you name it, we had the lot. And at the back, there's the crew. I got into trouble for that. So after that, I made everybody who wants to say something write it on one side of an A4 piece of paper. And if you can't say it in 3 minutes, there ain't time to say it at all. Sorry. But, you know, I got stuck in the dicky seats because I was too fat, so that was mainly God saying to me, Lynn, you need to go on a diet, so I did. I've only forgotten the name of one chap that I was about to bury. It was a graveyard burial, and for some stupid reason, I didn't put his name down, write his name down. And you know how it is, ladies and gentlemen, when you're trying to remember somebody's name, you know? What's his name? And I went through every name possible. And it wasn't until the hearse arrived and the family came. I said, oh, are you here for... Oh, yes, we're there. Fine. I can take you to a lady's house who on her mantelpiece keeps the ashes of her late husband in an egg timer. The so-and-so didn't do a day's work in his life, he's certainly going to do some now. I went to visit a lady after I conducted her husband's service, and we were having a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden she put a glass on the coffee table in front of me with a pair of false teeth in. She says, "Do you know anybody that could do with these? He had them brand new before he died. It's a shame to waste them." At funerals, we vicars get asked for all sorts of music, all right? This is the top 5 music choices now at funerals, all right? Are you waiting for this? Always Look on the Bright Side, Match of the Day, Coronation Street, Wake Me Up Before You Go, and Another One Bites the Dust. Can't believe it, can you? Well, you can if you're a vicar. I'm watching the time. And of course, Hatch, Match and Despatch includes baptisms as well. And it's still a privilege and a pleasure to welcome people, children, babies into the church to be baptised into the family of God. My colleague opened the front door one morning and to find a woman on the doorstep. "Here," she said, "baptise this baby while I go shopping." I answered the telephone one Wednesday afternoon, and the lady at the other end, she said, "I'm just ringing up," she says, "to check on the details for Friday's afternoon baptism." And you know when, and I looked in the diary, and I knew jolly well there wasn't a baptism on Friday afternoon. And I said as much, and I says, "Are you sure you've got the right church?" "Oh yes," she said, yes, we're coming at 2 o'clock for the baptism of the little one." I said, "I'm sorry," I said, "but there's been no baptism arranged here in this church on Friday afternoon. In fact, there is something else in church," I says, "but certainly not a baptism." I says, "You'll have to come back another time." "I can't," she says, "we've told everybody. I've put the pub across the road." I said, "Well, can we not arrange it for another time, you see?" You know, which is fair enough, being a Friday afternoon. She says, "No," she says, "we're emigrating Saturday morning." Oh, right, okay then. So I had to deal with that one. I was in Asda one Christmas, and you know what Asda's like at Christmas, a couple of days before Christmas? The world and his wife is there, isn't it? And I came upon at the till in the queue, the lengthy queue, a couple that I'd married a couple of years before, and in their arms was the baby. And there was nothing much to do in the queue but coochie-coo and, you know, chat and everything else, you say, as you do. And the till girl looked really, you know, tired and harassed and fed up. And the mother, she said, "Lynn," she said, "it would give us great pleasure if you could bless the baby." "Oh yes," says Lynn. So I get some new handbag for me, you know, my diary. No, she says, "we want you to do it now." I said, "Now?" "Yes," she said. And I thought, well, you know, what do? You can't sort of say, well, no, you need a church and all this. So in fair dues to the queue and the girl on the till, and I just had, you know, simple prayers, and off they went, and we did the baptism another time. But that's good, isn't it? Something nice to happen. Something nice, I suppose, happened was the day that I was asked to go down to the reception to find one of the cleaning ladies with a box on her lap. Now, in our hospital, we house every spring ducks, families of ducks, and we look after them, feed them. They've got a pond, they've got a little house and everything else. We really look after them as if they're own. And one of the magpies had a pecking session at one of the little chicks, you know. So they called the RSPCA. "Yes," says Lynn, "yes, fine. Wondering where I was going to come in all this, all right? Will you baptise this duck?" Well, I baptised some things in my time. And I thought, this is important, so I said, let's have a name for this here duck. Let's call it Hope. So off we baptised this here duck, Hope, and off it went, and never saw it again. Very sad, isn't it? But it is all in a name, ladies and gentlemen, all right? All in a name. Would you like to hear what people call their children? All right? I don't know why Roosevelt decided that Kermit was a good name for his son, to name it after a frog, eh? Just recently, there's a child baptised called Alias. Alias. And my friend said to the mum and dad, no, surely it must be Alice or whatever. No, Alias. Why Alias? Well, we've been watching back programmes of Alias Smith and Jones, and we can't write the name. I met a teacher this year who's in his class is a young boy called Bridge, and they've called him Clifton. And what about Conquest? There's a footballer, Norman Conquest. There is a young chap walking around called Christopher Peter Bacon. If you're in here, don't blame me, blame your parents. Chris P. Bacon. What about broccoli? Now, if you remember your history, Napoleon had a decree that all names had to be proper in France, all right? And you saw this on the television and in the papers last year, I think it was, where a family took to High Court in France the right to call their child Nutella. Can you imagine calling a child? And thankfully they said no. What about Leicester Railway? Now, all these are true. Honestly, if you have time to look into the records and everything else, the surname is Day, all right? Day, and they call the child Timon. She's 4 years old now, about, and the surname is Waters, and they called her Mineral Waters. We all know the Albert Halls. Is Teresa Green in the room? Teresa Green? Some of the celebrities: Summer Rain, Apple, Banjo, Northwest. Now in Birmingham, there's a gentleman with a surname Knows, Knows. They called him God. God knows. A challenging one for me when I was sadly conducting a service of burial was Merry Christmas. Should I say Mary, you know? Now, you've all been to baptisms, I take it. You've all stood around the font and in the church, and just think of this poor vicar now. All right? I have to read this. This child, all right? She's probably about 4 or 5 now. Anne, Bertha, Cecilia, Diana, Emily, Fanny, Gertrude, Hypatia, Lug, Jane, Kate, Louisa, Maud, Nora, Ophelia, Quince, Rebecca, Starkey, Teresa, Ulysses, Venus, Winifred, Xenophon, Yeti, Zeus, Pepper. I worked with a Dr. Death, D-E-A-T-H. I met only last week the cousin of Annette Curtains. And the best one, the vicar was elderly and rather forgetful. And the couple, the mummy and daddy, were advised to write the child's name and attach it to her dress in case the vicar forgot the name, all right? So at the coming of the hour, round the font, the vicar took the child in his arms and says, by what name do you call this child to be baptised? And they said, it's pinned on her. Pinned on her, I baptise you. As a vicar, we do some house visiting at times. And I was asked to take Holy Communion to a gentleman that had been a well-known and a long-term member of our church, and he was unable to come to church now, so he wanted Holy Communion. Fine. Would I go at 2 o'clock this one afternoon? Yes, says Lynn. Fine, lovely. So I don't like being late. Anybody knows me, I do not like being late. So I arrived just sort of gone 10 to. thinking that we could sit and have a chat, you know. And the grown-up son opened the door for me and come in, Lynn, come in. So I walked along the hall and I got to the door frame and stay there, don't move. So I stood there until neighbours had finished. I went into a house one day and a smell hit my nose. And the dog had pooed on the carpet, and I thought to myself, what do I say about this? So I just shifted around and said nothing. I did go into a house, I was invited to a home one day, lovely couple who wanted their golden wedding anniversary service. And we were sitting there one Saturday morning, and they got this tiny little dog who started to yap, all right? And it got louder and louder, and the couple didn't shut it up or anything. After about 10-15 minutes, it was really difficult, you know, to make myself and heard and all this. She says, I'm sorry, Reverend Lynn. She says, but you're going to have to go. I said, why? We haven't finished. The dog's had enough of you. I'm going to finish off because time's getting on, and I know you all have had enough of me talking to me. This is how people are, all right? When we meet people, we never know what we're going to come up against when we go into people's homes in situations or anything else like that. And I've been asked to take a service for a gentleman who had died just before Christmas, a few days before Christmas, several years ago. This is when I was in Stoke-on-Trent. And could I meet the family on Boxing Day at lunchtime, which is a strange time to organise a funeral, I know. But apparently the family were all going to be together. So that was a good thing really to do. So 12:30, fine. So I turns up at 12:30 on the doorstep, and the house is, all the curtains are shut, all right? Knock, 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 nothing. Knock, 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 nothing, 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 nothing. Knock, 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 nothing. And all of a sudden, a hoover starts up inside. Oh, you say, so I thought, at least somebody's in now. I'd woken them up, but there's, you know. And this hoover's going, and a little face appears between the curtains, you know, the gap in the curtains. Ma'am, it's the vicar. She'll have to bleep, 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 stay there. Which I did till 10:01. When she opened the door, oh, Reverend Lynn, she says, I'm terribly sorry, she said, that I couldn't open the door before. She said, but she said, last night we had a party. They just had a bereavement, remember? We had a party, she says, and I couldn't possibly ask you to come in with all the mess. Well, I walked into the house and they had had a fantastic party, all right? You could see the remnants of this really bottles and ashtrays and drinks, and there was Christmas trees and all sorts of manner of stuff, all right? So I sat down and there was nobody else there but the daughter of the chap that had died. Now remember, I was expecting the family, all right, and they said, oh no, they've all got hangovers and they can't make it and all that. So okay, we did the arrangements, that was fine. Would I go on the Thursday evening to say prayers with the family? Now on the Friday was the day before New Year's Eve, all right? Yes, says Lynn, of course I will, of course I will. And on this time, it was 8 o'clock in the evening, so I went dressed in me long circle, you know, me little cassock, and looked really reverent. And I knocked on the door at 8 o'clock, and the door opened, and I was hit by music, party music. Okay, tomorrow's the funeral. And I walked into the lounge, and there was a good party going on, all right? Booze and drink and music and food, all right? Along this wall here was the buffet, beautiful buffet. Along the wall there was all the booze. Lots of booze, ladies and gentlemen, lots of booze. Along the wall there on a trestle table was Dad in his open coffin, with a cigarette in one hand, a bottle of beer in the other, a piece of tinsel round his neck, and a Christmas hat on his head. That, ladies and gentlemen, is life of a vicar today. God bless you all. Most of us have been matched. but eventually we will all dispatch. Thank you.
Very much, Lynn, or should I say the Reverend Lynn, for a hilarious look at the
I've
church.
only given you a bit.
Only a bit. But what a welcoming and open, refreshing look at the Church of England you have given us. I could not help comparing to our last talk last month, was on the subject of Barbara Pym, who used to write about the 1950s and earlier, when the Church of England was a very more closed kind of social circle, with all the spinsters having unhealthy thoughts about the vicar and the rest of it. What a new refreshing wind of change it must be to have women priests in the church now. So thank you very much indeed, and a good future to the church.